Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Soul Seekers podcast, where we believe that hunting has the power to transform lives through primal adventure as we share our mission of mentorship is conservation. To learn more about everything we do, check out our show on Carbontv or go to soulseekersnation.com. Freedom on, everybody, and stay soulful. This podcast is proud to be brought to you by the Crazy Elk Company. Go to crazyoutcompany.com to pick up yourself a tag wallet, custom kill kit, or one of their e-tag systems to throw in your pack this coming hunting season. Use the code SOULFUL with a capital S to save 20% at checkout. This podcast is also proudly brought to you by OnX Hunt. When I first got into hunting, I kept hearing all about public land and different access and how to find different locations to hunt. I was like, well, how are people even identifying all this stuff? Well, sure enough, I came across the number one hunting GPS app, and that is OnX Hunt. If you guys want to get better at hunting and go deeper into your scouting, OnX Hunt is the number one GPS app for that. Join the millions of hunters who trust OnX Hunt to find more game, discover new access, and hunt smarter. It was a game changer for me, and I know it's going to be a game changer for you if you've never used it. If you have used it, you know the power that it holds. Guys, I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you want to know more about OnX, go to onxmaps.com/hunt and check out their app. Be blessed, freedom on, and stay soulful. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Soul Seekers podcast. I'm your host, Johnny Mack, and today I'm joined by a fellow podcaster himself and just an all-around great dude, somebody who I got to meet in person at the Western Hunt Expo back in February, but I've been following along with his podcast for quite some time, and that is Sam Ayres of the Wild Initiative podcast, formerly Living Country in the City. Did I say it right?
Okay.
Ayres.
Yes, sir. You might be overselling it a little bit with the all around good guy, but I'll take what I can get. I appreciate you having me on, man. Like, especially after I was a total a-hole and ghosted you without even realizing it.
It's all right, brother. You know, you got to live that ghost life every now and then. That's why it's Soul Seekers. A lot of people call the soul the ghost. So
There you go. I mean, I always have to explain to people, like, listen, I have like severe ADHD and the memory of a goldfish, and so typically, if I ghost you, it's very rarely personal. Like, if I block you, that's a whole other story. But if I just am like having a conversation and then gone, it's probably because I saw something shiny that really got excited about.
hold on. Did you see that butterfly right there?
Exactly.
Oh man,
Squirrel. Dude, there's like I got my window right here, and there's birds that constantly jumping around, and all day long I'm like, huh? Huh? It's bad. It's
yeah,
really bad.
tough life, man. Tough life. Being a school teacher, I when people always say ADD, like, oh, ADD, I'm like, I don't know, man. Sometimes it's more like BAD.
Shit.
But obviously that's a case by case basis. So, Sam, you are let's start at the very beginning. You were a dude who lived in California. You
Not just in California, but in like the center of the shit. Like, I was in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. I lived, I mean, when I started hunting, I was living uh, I mean, a 2-minute walk from Hollywood and Vine. Like, I would walk across the Walk of Fame to get to the metro to go into work every day.
look at you. Dude, where are you from? Are you from California?
Born and raised in Long Beach, dude. So, one of my favorite stories is everyone at my last like official corporate job before quitting. They would always call me Country Sam. There's a bunch of Sams that worked there, and I was the dude wearing the cowboy boots, listening to country music. It just picked up, and so they, it was always Country Sam this or Country that. So we'd have these partners that we'd work with come in, and I'd be emailing back and forth with them. One of them's like, one day he looks at me, he's like, Country Sam, where are you from? And I'm like, well, you know what, Brian, why don't you guess? And he's like, well, I'm from down south, and you're into all that hunting and fishing, and I'd guess you're somewhere in the south, like I am. And I guess "Well, I'm from south of the 91 freeway, homie. I'm from Long Beach." Like, I was born in Long Beach. I grew up in Orange County. It's
Dude, going to the forum and just dominating. So you were full on living the living country in the city was you. It was like to a
I
T.
mean, there's a reason I originally named the brand that. I mean, it was about as on the nose as I could make it. You know what I mean? It wasn't even living country in the city for a while. I mean, I was up until, geez, you know what, 10 years ago at the most recent, I was like wearing three-piece suits, like you maybe like one tattoo, no beard, and, I wanted to just drive my, like, little two-seat roadster convertible and I was working in advertising. I wanted the penthouse apartment in LA. I surfed. I wanted, like, that high-powered exec life. That was the life I lived. That's the life I was building and wanted at the time. Like, so it wasn't even just like, "Oh, yeah, I was this kinda country guy, but I was living in the city." Like, no, I was completely unrecognizable from the person I am today.
Mm. That's a pretty powerful statement because not too many people can say like from the get go. I I felt like I wasn't in my home, right? Like this whole, I'm from here, but I'm not from here concept. Um, so I actually one of my things is I always wanted to be a cowboy. The opening line to my book that I've yet to release is I've always wanted to be a cowboy, but I've never ridden a horse. And this concept of like I'd watch John Wayne movies. Shane was one of my favorite cowboy westerns growing up. This idea of the Lone Ranger on his horse with grit, courage, determination, and just setting off and being like, if it's meant to be, it's up to me type thing. And here we go and challenging yourself. So that was always on my soul. But here you were, you're just like, dude, country music, baby, let's do it. And how old are you, by the way?
I'm, gonna be 40 in a few months,
Yeah, so
like, in
you
February.
grew up in Long Beach in the heart of West Coast rap music.
I mean, like, I was never a big rap like, I didn't even listen to contemporary music until I was, like, in my late 20s, like, maybe even my 30s, like, so I have these, like, weird holes in my music. Like, I grew up listening to, like, classic rock and oldies, like, when classic rock wasn't the shit that we, like, grew up with. Um, like, when classic rock was, like, Joe Walsh and James Taylor and BTO, Bad Company, all that stuff. So I grew up listening to that, and I grew up listening to, like, oldies from the '50s, '60s, '70s kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah,
that
the
was the music
Sunshine
I
Oldies.
loved.
Totally.
Yeah.
Dude, I saw James Taylor in concert 2 days after 9/11 on nine
Oh,
thirteen
shit.
2001. It was one of the most epic concerts I've ever seen. Um, so you and I have a lot of the same music catalog that we like to draw from. I dig it. Now, when did you start hunting? When was this idea of I want to become a hunter? I want to be self-sufficient, that lifestyle?
So, I mean, that really didn't happen. I mean, it's kinda hard to say exactly because it was this, like, gradual process over the course of maybe, like, 5 or 6 years, to where, like, I really take it back, and I count the whole start of this to a bachelor party in Vegas. Like, it goes back to bachelor party in Vegas. We go out and go to the gun store in a bunch. I made everyone wear suits the entire time. So we all went to the gun store in full fucking suits, and it was pretty awesome. But you know, you go to the gun store, you shoot like fully automatic rifles and all this shit that we can't have in California, right? Um, so we're out there shooting, and I'm just like, I shot a Desert Eagle, like a 50 cal, and all this stuff, and I'm just like, oh gosh, this is amazing. Like a month later, I owned a gun. Um, and like it was a Desert Eagle. It wasn't like it was a hunting rifle or anything. It was stupid. Like I knew it was this stupid, totally useless gun, but I wanted it. Um, my buddy knew I liked to shoot, and he invited me out for this thing. He's like, "Hey, but you'll need like a 22 rifle." So I'm like, "All right." I go bought a Ruger 1022. Um, I fell in love with it. It was this like weekend marksmanship training course, and it's volunteer based. And so after you graduate the course, you can teach. It took me a couple tries, but I graduated the course, and then suddenly I got into teaching rifle marksmanship. And at this point, I'm still like a city dude. Like I have no desire to like live this country lifestyle. Everyone's telling me they're like, one of these days you're gonna want to like live in a small town. Well, it's just gonna take you a while. I'm like, you're an idiot. Like, I'm never gonna want that for my life. Like, I'm zero interest in that for my life. But so I'm sitting there, and I'm like teaching rifle marksmanship, and I'm like getting into a lot of just America and freedom, and like I'm teaching Revolutionary War history. I mean, I got a whole tattoo sleeve based on that, and I always say the tattoo even says Murica on it, Murica. It's and I fell in love with it, but I'm the kind of guy that once I become proficient at something, like I'm not the best at it, but like I can hit what I'm aiming at out to basically 1,000 yards, no problem, 9 times out of 10. Um, and I'm like, it just gets boring for me. I need a reason behind what I'm doing. So I started thinking about hunting. Like, I'm like, well, this seems like the next logical step, right? A use for, I mean, unless I'm gonna become a sociopath and do some shit we don't want to hear about, like, seems like the next step for for shooting is going hunting. And so I I didn't know what I was doing though. Like, I didn't have any friends that hunted. I had no effing clue where to even start. Like, I kind of knew I had to get like a hunting license, and I'm like, well, I guess I got to take this course through the state. But like, I would sign up, and then it was just never convenient, so I'd miss it, and it was just never happened. But that seed was planted at that point.
Mm.
The seed was planted, and I it started growing, and I was following like different hunters on Twitter, and then I found Eva Shockey, and like any red-blooded American boy, I fell madly in love, and she's always posting about bow hunting and all this stuff, and I'm like, crap, I didn't even think about bow hunting. Like, I used to shoot a bow as a kid, that sounds really cool, and went into Bass Pro just to price out bows. I wasn't going to buy anything, but man, they saw a sucker a million miles away. They sent the cute little petite blonde, like sales girl over to me, and I just blacked out and woke up in my car $700 poorer. Like, and from then on, like, I started a new job, and I met a guy at work that was a big uh elk hunter. He was backcountry hunter. He's actually my second ever podcast episode that I recorded, which is now my first podcast episode because I don't really promote the very first one. We won't talk about that. But it was just a different direction than I intended. Eventually took the podcast, but uh I was talking to him, and I'm like, "Oh man, elk hunting, that just sounds amazing. Like, I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that someday." He's like, "Well, why don't you?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, I've never been hunting before. Like, I don't, I need years of experience under my belt to do this, and I need like a ton of money to be able to afford it." And he's like, "No, you don't." He's like, "You could do it this year. This is January of 2017." He's like, "No, you can do that this year. You can go hunt elk this fall." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, I mean, it's gonna cost money, yeah, you're probably gonna need to hunt out of state, and, uh, you're probably gonna spend 1, 2 grand, something like that when it's all said and done, um, but you can go hunt that this year. I'm like, "For that little?" He's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "I can't, it just won't get through my skull that I can go do that." And finally, he's like, "Listen to these podcasts, subscribe to these podcasts, just listen to them. Check out this gear, check out this Elk 101 website." He sent me all of these resources, and he put me on the right path. He didn't necessarily like take me hunting, but he's the one that really put me on the path. And so I'm doing all of this, and I kind of have this Instagram going as I'm getting into all this stuff. Uh, and I realize, well, I'm like, I still don't really know anyone, and I want to ask all these people questions. So shit, maybe I'll start a podcast. And so, I mean, I was like 40 episodes deep almost before I ever went on my first hunt with that podcast.
Wow.
Like, you listen to all those first episodes, and like, I mean, it's all me trying to get more and more and more and consume all this information about hunting because I didn't have really the mentor. I didn't have granddad walking me through the woods, helping me carry my gun. I didn't have, dads and uncles that hunted. If I had asked them about it, like they probably would have figured out a way to take me, even though they didn't do it themselves. But I never had that prompting. And so I started my podcast because, well, if I'm going to have some mentors, I might as well reach out to some of the smartest, most successful people I can, right?
Right.
And that's really what got me into it, man. I went on my first elk hunt, and it was a disaster. That ended up in bilateral knee surgery and me being carted out on horses by a buddy. Um,
Go ahead. Tell
okay,
all
you
about
you
it.
you want the
Yeah.
story? Okay.
Yep.
So, I go like I'm planning, dude. Like I'm like fit. I'm like the fittest I've ever been. I'm like training, I'm planning, I'm like researching, I'm doing my e-scouting, like literally everything you can do to prepare for hunting season, like short of actually being there in the state on the ground. Like everything you can do. I'm getting the gear. I go in, like I had some savings and I just destroyed it all on hunting gear, man. Dude, I was like hook, line, and sinker, all the good shit. And I go out. I drive out and I'm like, I've got the plan, man. And the plan went completely off the rails because it had been like 60s and 70s the whole time in Idaho. Freak snowstorm blows in the day I'm driving out.
Wow.
And I didn't know it that I'm like, I didn't even think about it at the time. I'm like, well, I should have packed all my snow gear. No, like, I mean, I should pack like all my gear in case I'm going to need it. I didn't really think to do that. I just kind of packed what I was going to need for my hunt and left it at that. And I was very surprised because then I had to like run to a Sportsman's Warehouse, buy a bunch of crap that I didn't like balance out my kit. So I'm carrying probably like 20. I don't even want to admit how much weight I was carrying in there, dude. Like like 75, 80 pounds.
Yeah. Before an animal.
Going in, yeah.
Just imagine how
Going
heavy your
in.
pack would be coming out.
Jeez. Like, and it just about killed me getting in. Like, it was this. I went in the worst possible way. Like the road was closed. I didn't know, all the mistakes, everything that could go wrong. The road was closed. Went in the worst possible way. It was like chest high deadfall that I'm scrambling over. I finally get to my spot after like 7 hours of hiking, and I end up at the end of the first day of my hunt. Like once I'm actually out there, the first day of my hunt, I end up tearing the meniscus in my left knee. Like, I didn't know I tore it at the time. I thought I just overworked it. So I'm like, "Oh, give it some rest, tape it up, whatever." Go out the next day. I'm like, "Okay, it's feeling good." I'm out for I put on like I think 7, 8 miles and it gives out on me. And so the whole way back, I'm like babying it. Like it wasn't that far back. Like I was kind of going around. It was probably about 3, 4 miles back to my camp.
Right.
I'm babying it the whole way and I tear the meniscus in my other knee. And again, I don't know it's torn. Like I'm just like I just kind of wrecked my knees, right? And so I'm like, fuck, what do I do? And I've got my inReach, and I'm to clarify for everyone, I did not hit the SOS button at any time, but I've got my inReach, and so I'm texting my friends, my hunting buddies, my family. I'm like, what do I do? Like, how do I? They're like, you probably just overworked them. That take some vitamin I and tape them up. Take the rest of the day to rest, and then get after it tomorrow. So I did that, and like they're starting to feel okay. I get like a mile in, and they're just like screaming at me. Gets to the point where like I get back, take another day to rest them, and I can't even get like a mile with no pack on. Before like I have to like literally like stop and like lay down for an hour because my knees hurt so fucking bad. So I
I'm
finally
s-
have to text my buddy. I'm like, dude, I need you to come bring the horses, but not because I killed something. Like, I need you to bring in the horses and help me pack out because I can't get out on my own right now. And I mean, I had this plan in place. I had people in contact that were able to help me. Um, but there was a lot of pride swallowed, whole lot of pride swallowed. And it wasn't even so much ego, but it was just the fact that I effectively did nothing on that entire hunt and had to get carted carted out for it. And it was humbling, man. It was incredibly humbling. Um, got a lot of support from some amazing people and friends I've made and former podcast guests. Then I got some absolute hate from some complete douchebags that because I was wearing a Mountain Ops hat at the time, I literally like, I didn't know, dude. I was like some new dude to hunting, and like the Mountain Ops guys were really nice to me, so I wore their damn hat. Like, like, I didn't know that there was like turf wars and gang wars between like dudes that take wilderness athlete and dudes that take Mountain Ops. Like, fuck you, bro. No, fuck you.
Yeah, the Bloods and
Like,
Crips of the hunting world.
jeez, like, bro, like, okay. Is stepping into the war. And so, dude, I got like all of these, like, we're talking like people with like 40, 100,000 followers that are like me with my 2,000 followers. They're coming after me, being like, "You're such a fucking pussy, da 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 da. You're a little bitch." Like, I'm like, whoa, whoa. I don't know who you are. Like, why do you hate me so much? And it was, dude, it's wild. It's wild.
Social media is weird when it
Yeah.
comes like that.
Oh, dude. It's like it makes the world more accessible, but so much more divisive at the same time. It's
Dude,
like it can bring so many people together that can then hate each other. Like it's
you're right. Like, hey, have you met so and so? They hate your guts. So you went on that first hunt, you got packed out, and that sucked. You had surgery. How long until, how many years or seasons or whatever until you were able to actually notch your first tag?
Oh, well, I mean, when I went in for my surgery, I pretty much told my doctor, he was like, "We'll do one knee and then, you'll recover, then we'll do the other knee." I'm like, "That's gonna take months." He's like, "Yeah, but you'll be able to move around." I'm like, "Well, why don't we just do both knees at once? I gotta be back in the mountains in December." Like, and this is like October that I'm having this surgery. And he's looking at me like, "You have something wrong with you."
Uh huh.
Um, and it's like that's one of the biggest things. Like I always tell new guys, I'm like, you gotta be tenacious. Like, this isn't something you just kind of can casually want. If you just casually like if you want to hunt elk, if you want to like do the big romantic picture of like backcountry hunting, bear and mule deer and elk with your bow and standing on the mountainside with the snow blowing, and it's like, freaking Ranella movie or Ranella, or something.
Right.
Donnie Vincent the hell out of it, kind of a thing. If that's what you want, I mean, by all means, go for it. Set your expectations reasonably, but if that's what you want to chase, then by all means chase it. But you are going to have to be tenacious. You're going to have to want it more than just about anything else to be successful. If you just want to kind of casually want something, go waterfowl hunting, man. It's fun. It's a fucking blast. Go upland game hunting. Pick up fly fishing. Like that's stuff you can do more kind of as a hobby. But if you want to backcountry hunt, like unless you're paying a lot of money, you gotta love it, man.
Yeah.
You gotta be passionate about it. And so, to answer your question, I mean, I went out in Colorado the next year, elk hunting. Um, as far as tagging my first elk, 4 years. Tagging my first animal was that following year in August. I'm big fan of that over the counter archery tag for deer in Arizona. And I'd been hunting that in January. That's what I wanted to do in December. That's why I wanted to be in the mountains. So I was hunting that 2018 in Arizona, and I was just bombing after it. I would work all week. I'd take a half day on Friday. I told them, I'm like, "Hey, during these few weeks, I need to be gone by noon on Fridays." And they're like, "All right." So I'd take off. I'd drive to Arizona, get there, hopefully if I got out on time before the sun went down, get in a little bit of glassing before the sun was down, and then spend until Sunday afternoon hunting, glassing, trying to chase down some mule deer, not finding any success, and then I drive back for another week of work, and I did that for the entire month of January. Um, I then had a buddy reach out. He'd been kind of following along with my story, and he just reached out on Instagram. And he's like, "Hey, man, we hunt Arizona all the time. Come August, come on out. We're doing we're doing an antelope hunt, but we'll also help you with your deer tag. And we went through, and it was just looking like it wasn't going to happen. Like it was just a rough year for it, and I was new. Like I was screwing up stocks, all kinds of stuff. Um, last day, last day of the hunt, like last hour of shooting light, we come across one and got in 50 yards on him, just hammered him. He went maybe about 10 yards and dropped. And he is this teeny little, no, you can see him, but
Oh
the
yeah,
listeners can't. He
nice.
is this teeny ass little velvet spike that's behind me, like probably a year and a half old, maybe. Um, but he's always going to hold this place of honor, man. It was my first tag filled, amazing experience. I learned a ton. Um, but yeah, so it was that next year. I found some good people to go out with me to show me the ropes, to fill in those spots where I had deficiencies. Um, and then had some success later that year, the next year on Javelina. Um, then a couple years later, in it would have been the not the 21, so the 2020 season down in Arizona, got my first elk finally. Went out with John Stallone. I drew Arizona with 3 points for elk,
Nice.
and it was a rough year, man. Same kind of thing. Like we just were not having any luck, but we're going after it, going after it, going after it. And I should have known, because every time I hunt Arizona, if it happens, it's going to be the last day, like the last chance. It's going to require grinding, and working my ass off. And then I'm gonna have a chance at success. It's like that's Arizona for me, man.
Hmm.
Like guaranteed, guaranteed.
Wild. Well, I want to back up here for a second. And one of the things that you were talking about, like, you have to be tenacious. You can't just, if you want to do it, but not really want to do it. On this podcast, we always talk about you always get what you want. And so you need to identify what it is that you want, because when you want something bad enough, you always get it, right? Like if you're hungry enough for food and you need to eat and I really want to eat, you're going to find something to eat regardless. And so it's all ultimately comes down to how bad do you want it, and then asking yourself, what is it that you actually want? Did you want to be a backcountry hunter once you started doing this, or did you more want to become a hunter with all these different experiences?
I wanted to become an archery elk hunter.
Yeah.
I wanted the Remy Warren, Donnie Vincent, Ryan Lamper's experience, man. Like I wanted the romance of it. Like, I I literally think that is the most badass thing on earth. Like is the solo hunt, the self-reliance, the just everything about it. Like just like spoke. I mean, come on, we're on the Soul Seekers podcast here. That that shit spoke to my soul. Like
Yes.
I felt it.
Yeah.
And I mean it changed my life pursuing it.
Yeah.
Like again, throwing back to the very beginning, I am such a so far of a different person than I used to be. I'm unrecognizable. Like people that knew me back then would never in a million years. But I mean, yeah, they'd recognize me, but like there would be no comparison. They wouldn't ever believe it. They'd think I had like a traumatic brain injury or something that completely changed who I am.
Right.
Which I mean, I did have a few motorcycle accidents, so those concussions could be to blame for the
Is
hunting
that why you
addiction.
were driving your little 2-seater convertible out to Arizona to hunt deer?
No, I was actually I had switched out to a Jeep at that point.
There you go.
I was driving a very not gas efficient Jeep, so it was a little rough, but
So I love what you said, like, the mystique, the grandeur of backcountry elk hunting. Backcountry archery elk hunting. Like it doesn't get
solo
better. Yeah.
DIY public land, like that's
It's the pinnacle. It's the cowboy story, right?
mm-hmm,
On their
mm-hmm.
high horse, out on the prairie doing their thing. I think Willie Nelson is coming up and he's redoing one of his old songs like Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Solo DIY Archery Elk Hunters.
Oh, yeah. Because they'll spend all their money on bows and packs and boots.
Right?
Um,
But that's the whole idea is like it's so attractive, but it really, unless you want it, it will beat you down into the ground very
mhm.
quickly.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. It's like, what are our lives nowadays? Like, we live more comfortably than just about anyone in the world in history at this point in our lives. Like, what decisions have you made today? Like, what are like the prime decisions you've made today? I'm like, okay, well, do I work out before I go feed my chickens or after? Okay, do I have time to do this before we record the podcast? Like, okay, should I hop on that conference call now or schedule it for later? What project should I work on? Like 90% of our days, those are the max decisions we make. Do I, what brand do I wear? What brand t-shirt do I wear today? Do I wear like the Birch Barrel t-shirt or, do I wear,
Do you put
the
on
whatever?
the mountain ops hat? Do you,
Yeah. Like, do I wear it's like or shoot, even simplified. Do I wear the blue shirt or the black shirt? And that's like I'm not even gonna see anyone today. And that's still like effectively the most important decision I'm making. Like these are the lives we live now. Our decisions don't matter 90% of the time. Like really, really matter. Yeah, okay,
life and death matter.
it might screw up. We may like have to pay an overdraft charge or have to find a cheaper apartment or something like that. Or miss out on that good date. I mean, that stuff it may seem like the end of the world, but that does not matter. What it comes down to it doesn't matter. And like I mean, for everyone, but especially I think as guys, like we need to feel like the decisions we make matter. And when you are out hunting, and especially like, you're sitting in a tree stand for whitetail. I love that. Don't get me wrong. Like, and I will never talk crap about that because I love sitting in a tree stand hunting whitetail. It's a different experience. I love sitting in a blind shooting ducks, dude. That is a freaking blast. Um, but when you're hunting, like out hunting a bear or elk or mule deer, and you're out there, even with a buddy, and you're back for several days with what's on your pack, and you don't know what the weather's gonna, it can start raining, it can start snowing, it can be 95 degrees and the sun beating down on you. Um, you have to find water or pack it in. You have to have that water. You have the food that you're bringing with you. You're crossing ridges and, side hilling on scree slopes and all of this stuff where the decisions you make, oh, they fucking matter. Like they really matter.
Yeah.
You take one wrong step, your ass is at the bottom of that mountain.
Well, that's what I
Like,
was gonna say. Is like ever since, so I started being a hunter as a father. I had a 1 year old son at home, and now I have 3 little boys and a wife. I want to return home to, and I emphasize want because that want overrides my want
want.
to shoot any sort of animal if it's going to put me in a position that could jeopardize my life or my safety or my ability to return home to my family, which is really interesting. And very often people do not put themselves in situations that require that sort of thinking, right? Like the saying, no risk, no reward. So,
Mhm.
so, how far are you willing to risk in order to gain the reward of what you want? And that's why it's so
Oh, yeah.
important to identify what it is that you ultimately want in the end.
And I mean, in this whole process, there's also steps too. Like, yeah, I mean, I think all our ultimate goals, yeah, I want to be a successful backcountry hunter or a successful hunter. I want to bring home big elk. I want to, fill the freezer. I want to do all these things. Um, but within those wants, there's stepping stones. That's the ultimate goal. But you're taking a road trip from Los Angeles to New York City. Um, you know, unless unless you're going to pay a lot of money for a flight, like you're not getting there in one hop. Um, you're gonna stop in Vegas first, maybe, or then you're gonna make your way to Salt Lake, and then you're gonna stop in Wichita, and then you're gonna make your way up. You're gonna have all these steps along the way, and it's important to identify those and see those as successes, and see those measures of successes on the way to your ultimate one. Because I feel like if you only focus on that final want, you start making poor decisions. And that was something big I learned early on, especially with that huge, spectacular failure of a first hunt. Is that ability to be like, you know what? Okay, I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. I barely even had a hunt last year. You know what? This year, I actually saw a couple of elk. That was awesome.
Mm.
That was there were cows, saw 2 cows. We weren't able to even get in on them, but I saw them. That's a huge win. That is something I've never experienced before. Um, the following year, I was hunting and I actually got in on elk. I located them. I heard my first elk bugle, like in-person elk bugle, bro. Like I was like I was like a kid in a candy store, man. Like I was hunting Montana. I heard my first elk bugle. I was getting into them consistently almost every single day. I couldn't quite seal the deal though. I got within shooting range. I drew on one. I actually took a shot that was I wouldn't have even taken it if I'd correctly ranged it. It was almost 90 yards and I'd ranged it, but I think I hit a piece of grass when I ranged it. And so it was like 65 yards. I'm like, sweet, I can take this shot. It was literally like, and it was dude, it was such a badass scene. Like it was this whole herd, and it was the like last 2 satellite bulls, and they were going at it, dude. They were like locked up and snorting and fighting, and you hear them, and I'm like watching this thing, and I'm like, and they're locked up and they're like frozen and not moving. I'm like, dude, perfect broadside shot right here. I'm taking this, and I fling it, and it just like boom, like 10 yards in front of them into the ground, and they both look at it. They like look at the arrow and like whatever, and they go back to fighting and just like wander off. And I'm like, well, that was embarrassing. I just made an ass of myself in front of the elk. Um, but I got in. I took a shot, man. Like that was amazing, and I was not quote unquote successful that year. I didn't fill a tag, but man, dude, I learned so stinking much about elk hunting. And then finally, I mean, it helps that I went with a guide. I learned so much going with a guide. It was incredible. Like, I mean, also I learned just how damn loud I am when I'm in the woods. I am a bull in a china shop, even when I'm trying to be quiet, which probably doesn't help anything. Um, but I learned then so much from him. And so finding those measures of success, though, I mean, I took home little 4-point raghorn bull. I love him. He's awesome. It's my first elk. You want to know what I want to do next year? As long as it's bigger or has one more point, that's all I care about is the next level, taking it the next step. I don't have to. I mean, don't get me wrong. A 380 bull like walks out broadside when I'm walking down the trail with my bow in my hand. Oh, that thing's getting plugged on the first day. I don't I don't care. Like I'll take that 380 bull any day. But my measure of success at that point is just being a little bit better, a little bit more capable, a little bit stronger, having a better experience. Even this season, like I took that bull with the guide. So, I could even take something as long as I take something by myself, solo on my own. That's a step up. That's growth. That's me uh having learned something new. And when that's your mindset, dude, you always win. You
Yeah.
always fucking win, man. Like when your only goal is to take home the biggest bull on the mountain, when like that's your only measure of success, when it's not to have an incredible hunt, adventure to get in on something, just to see cool shit, to learn something, whatever it is, when you don't have those other measures of success, you're gonna be disappointed a whole lot more
Yeah.
as you go through this whole hunting experience.
So wild. Yeah, my progression in my hunting career was I started off hunting coyotes. That was my first animal I hunted because I was coaching multiple sports and it was open year round.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know what public land was, which is very interesting because I also worked at REI and I backpacked for years, but people don't actually communicate the concept of public land. You don't learn it in school. You
Yeah.
don't, no one, like, if you're not in the industry of people talking about it, they don't talk about it. And so I was like, where can I hunt? Where can I hunt? And so then when I was able, I learned about Onyx and it changed. It was a game changer. I was like,
Oh,
holy
yeah.
crap. Dude, I was researching what is public land? State forest? Okay. Are there any state forests near me? What is like trying to figure out, oh, but you can't shoot on these. You can't recreational shoot. You can't, well, does hunting count as shooting? Because I want to
Mhm.
be shooting. Like I had so many barriers to entry and just figuring out what to do in regards to going hunting that I eventually realized that I could backpack and hunt the same areas. And
Yeah.
that's how I ended up killing my first animal. And then it's now I see an animal. If I'm seeing the animals I'm pursuing, whether I shoot or not, I'm like, hey, I'm a hunter now. I know what I'm
Mhm.
doing. I can find animals.
I mean, I think that's one of the things people don't realize when it comes to, like, barriers to entry for hunting. Like, a lot of us, if you grew up with it, like, you grew up again with, like, granddad's gun, you know about the big stuff, like, oh, you need a mentor, and oh, gear, you feel like you need to buy the best gear, and like there's a lot of stuff that's pretty evident that's a barrier to entry. But like it's like the little weird stuff like that, like what's public land and how do you access it? What can you hunt on it? Like that that is just kind of common knowledge for them that they grew up doing. Or like just weird little things you do in the hunt, or like how to stalk an animal, or how to build a, what kind of camo to buy, and a lot of this like little stuff that's just kind of second nature that, oh, I thought everyone kind of knew that, like it's just something I do, that they would never think to teach. Like that is one of the biggest barriers to entry, I think. And it's, or I shouldn't even call it a barrier to entry because it's not. That's not a barrier to entry. That's the barrier to success. Is is like that's what creates a bit part of that gap, I think, to success, because that's not the stuff people think to teach you
Mhm.
when you're learning to hunt. And I mean, that's part of the reason, like, I love hearing hunting stories. And I mean, I also love going on hunts with people because I can be like, wait, why did you do that? Or how did you do that? But just hearing hunting stories, you get little tidbits that come up that no one would think to teach you, like, if you're just like, "Hey, what are your best tips on mule deer hunting?" But if they tell you, like, this in-depth, detailed story about the last mule deer hunt they went on, and, like, they mention something, and, like, you pick that up and you get them to go in more detail on it, like, I feel like you learn so much more stuff from that, and that's the stuff you don't pick up just from, like, an instructional YouTube video, or, whatever the latest online course is.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. I remember one of the things that stood out to me was I was walking on a logging road and I wanted to walk towards the downhill side so I could see downhill. And someone told me, they're like, no, you need to walk on the uphill side as you're walking in. And then when you want to look down, walk to the edge, peek over, and then walk back because any animals that are downhill are going to see you walking along the edge of the hill the entire time and you're going to spook them out rather than walking stealthily out of vision and then creeping to the edge, peeking over. Do I see anything? See anything? No. Go back and continue on. I was like, holy crap, that's pretty mind blowing. The small things like that.
And when you do one thing like that and suddenly, like, you see your first, like, group of deer or something, like, you see those mule deer and you're like, Oh, that's why I haven't seen anything for, like, 4 days. It's like and I
Right.
mean, it's not always the case, but it's, like, so often, you just change that one thing, you may not fill that tag necessarily, but you'll see a little bit more success. You find, one of those pins to turn that lock.
Oh, totally.
You trip that one pin, you may have 1 more, you may have 6 more, like, but, you're closer.
So talking about like loudness, I used to, and maybe other people would differ to say, I was an elephant in a china closet as well, with how loud I was in the woods. One of my tips that I always like to tell people is I wear gaiters on every hunt to keep my pants from rubbing against each other because they bag up at the bottom.
You got the thick thighs or something? When
I
I
got,
mean,
dude, I
gators won't solve that. But
but just it's simple stuff like that, which has everything to do with the clothing you wear and then how you walk, but then it's all about the noise you make. And I was like,
Mhm.
dude, hopefully listeners are like, oh, this is some
Well,
gems right here.
and so there's like, everyone's like, "Well, you don't have to be quiet when you're, hunting elk." I'm like, but there's like a certain type of noise. Like if you're doing like the intentional like elk tromp, break a branch kind of a thing, like that's one thing. But when you're doing the like, I'm kind of trying to be quiet, but I'm like dragging my feet and kicking rocks and like screwing around, like shuffling my pack constantly, like that's not like that's not camouflage noise. That is just like I'm gonna scare away everything within a half a mile radius noise. It's um and that's the kind of like that was the one thing on the hunt, man. Like, and John and I are buddies. He was my guide, but because we're buddies, he took some extra liberties, and like he would just turn around and he would give me these looks like, "What the fuck, man? Like, bro, like, can you be any louder?" And it's me thinking I'm like being dead silent. And I slowly learned, and I mean, dude, the one thing that amazed me is like same kind of idea. Like, I thought I was going slow when I was in the woods, when I was looking for animals and when I was trying to stalk in on stuff and all. Like, dude, I thought I was creeping. I have no idea what going slow in the woods was. Like, I just had no idea. And guess what? It works. Wow. It's almost like, he's been guiding for years and years and has seen a ton of success and knows what he's talking about, like
Dude,
um
yeah.
it's
Well, that's what
it's eye opening.
one of the things I really, people don't like to pay for success, right? The whole I don't want to pay a guide to do a hunt. But at the same time, is how quickly do you want to reach your end goal? So a lot of times if you are hiring an outfitter to take you on a hunt and you don't ask questions, then that hunt is only going to be whatever type of result it delivers.
Mhm.
But if you take that and you say, well, okay, how much would you pay for a college course on how to hunt? Right? How much would you pay to hire Ryan Lampers one on one and take you hunting? That ends up being, people are like, oh, that I'd probably pay a lot. The exact same thing with hiring an outfitter. That is, you are paying for your course. They are yours for that time being.
Mhm.
You just dive deep into their mind. And if they're not giving you the answers that you want, you keep going and keep picking their brains, because you're not just paying for that experience, you're also paying for all the years of knowledge and their experiences that they can share with you. And that's one thing that I think is often mistaken when it comes to hiring outfitters or guides.
Yeah, it's, you it feels like it's easy to categorize it as like, "Oh, you're paying someone to do your hunting for you, like, to do the work for you." Um, Not at all what it is, man. Yeah, it's like the best way to frame it is like, "This is your masterclass in hunting right here." Like, this is your masterclass in how to stalk a mule deer, how to, uh, what calls to use when on elk, 'cause it's one thing, you can listen to Paul Medell for 3 hours on a podcast and get some incredible information, but putting that into effective use in the field is a whole different ball game, man. And like, I don't know if you're anything like me, you'll have all of the information, man, all of the data. But then suddenly you get into the field and you always manage to find the one situation that like throws it all out the window. Or it's like you're in the field and just like, well, how do I deal with this situation? Like it doesn't fit any of these hundreds of scenarios that I've learned about and planned for. And that's the stuff that comes with experience. And when you don't have that experience, you need to pay for that experience. Like, or you're going to pay for it in with your wallet, or you're going to pay for it with your years, which
Yep.
also translates to your wallet.
Time is money. That's the whole,
Hmm.
that time is money. So Sam, you went from Los Angeles to what people refer to as Bos Angeles when you decided to be like, oh, I'm going to go more country, to now you are actually full on country in the small town off of Highway 2 in the northern part of Montana. Harv, what is it?
Haver.
Haver.
It is like literally the most American pronunciation. It's not Hav or anything. It's Haver. It is full on. It took me so long to like get that into my head how to pronounce it. Like, but yeah, man. Like I especially once my lifestyle started changing. Like I always knew it was Montana. Like I'd been as a kid, and I was aware, but like just in my head, I always knew it was Montana for me. And like I'd been trying to get out of California for years at that point. Um, and it just everything was falling through. Everything was falling through. Finally got out of LA and I went up to Northern California and I was like, you know what, I want to start working remote, told my job, and they didn't want to lose me. So they're like, okay. Um, they also knew I hated Los Angeles, and I literally was working in downtown Los Angeles. Um, and so I'm living with family, kind of as just an interim solution until I can find a place of my own to buy. And I just wasn't finding stuff. I finally end up going on this Arizona hunt, and I always had a saying: "Is Montana's on the way home from everywhere." Like, I mean, I lived in Northern California. I was hunting Arizona. Montana's not on the way home, like a little bit out of the way.
Yep.
But I'm like, screw that. I'm going to Montana. I mean, like that was actually one of the best trips. Had a successful hunt in Arizona. I'm cruising up. I go fly fish Colorado for a week. I meet this dude, Ben Sittig. He goes by Huge Fly Fisherman on Instagram, and I have a beer with him. We connect, and he's like, Can you be in this area of Utah in 2 days?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess." He's like, "All right, you're going on a float trip with me." So then I like do a 3-day float trip in Utah, and then I get a call from my buddy. He knew I was coming up to Montana. He's like, "Where the hell have you been? I thought I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna be there in a couple of days." He's like, "No, you need to be here tomorrow because we've got some duck hunting and pheasant hunting to do." I'm like, "What the hell?" So I'm up there, and he basically uh, talks me into a couple of opportunities that didn't end up working out. But 3 days later, I was looking for a house in Montana,
Mm.
like, or a place to stay. I mean, it took me a couple of weeks to find the right place, which actually turned out to not be the right place at all. But I made some good friends with my neighbors. Um, but yeah, I mean, I was living in Belgrade, just outside of good old Los Angeles. And it's getting expensive. My landlords were being total a-holes. And I was like motivated. I was like, man, I gotta find a place. I gotta find a place. I wasn't, stuff was falling through. I was getting outbid on stuff, like getting stuff snatched up before I could even put a bid on it. Like, I just couldn't find anything that was what I wanted. And I was just like, it was literally like a fit of frustration. I was just like sitting here and I was just like, oh, and I hit the zoom wheel out on my mouse, and it like zooms way out on Zillow. And I see this like one pin that looked like it was in Canada. And I'm like, what? And so I kind of zoom in on it. I'm like, what's this property way up here in Canada? Da, 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 da. And I like send it, and I kind of look at it. I'm like, huh. So I send it to my family, and they're like, this looks really good. Like, and so I was like, yeah, I take a weekend. I came up here, and I fell in love with this property, man. It is raggedy as hell. It is. I would hesitate to say it's even got good bones. Like, it is a mess. But it's 7 acres, man. It's like a kind of a little mini ranch style farm property. It's got a barn built in the 1920s. It's got a 1,200 square foot workshop where I can forge knives. It's got a big old dude, I'm rocking the double wide right now.
Nice.
It's like a modified double wide that's got like a I think with the basement included, it's like 3,600 square feet.
Wow.
Like, the basement's all drywalled in, I'm renovating the rooms, dude, like, I'm gonna have, like, a seven-bedroom place here, and, um, you know, 2.5, 3 years ago, I was literally the biggest trope in the world, dude. I was a 37-year-old living in his parents' basement running a podcast. Like, what the hell, bro? Like,
Dude, you're coming up in the world, big dog.
just a little bit, I'm trying, but I mean, I get a lot of people, I mean, with anything, you find success in anything, you get all of the, must be nice. Like, yeah, dude, I've had a ton of people help me out. Like, I mean, all of my success in hunting has been because of people helping me out. This whole life is due to people helping me out, but it's also due to me busting my ass, man. Like, and what were we talking about? What do you want?
What do you
You
want?
know, what do you want? Like, even more than hunting, like, I wanted that hunting experience. I wanted to become the backcountry elk hunter. But more than that, I wanted this life. Like, that was just one piece of that puzzle of what the greater, what I want, which is this life. I wanted to have my own place, my own property. I want to build something that's mine, that's unique to me and that I love. And that's what I'm doing up here. And I've had to sacrifice a lot. Like, I would much rather be down in Gallatin Valley, dude. That's the most beautiful areas in the United States. Like, um, but I had to sacrifice a little bit and come up to Havre, and I'm 40 miles outside of town. Like,
Mm.
it's a little rough some days out here. Car broke down. When my car broke down, I had to take it into town. I don't have a backup. I don't have a motorcycle anymore. I didn't have anything. I spent 3 weeks just here on the property. Like, and
Just you and your dog.
just me and the dogs, and, like, the groceries were getting a little bit sparse. I was making my own tortillas, which was kind of a cool experiment. But, I was out here and I was fine. There's sacrifices involved in it, and, everyone's like, "Oh, the other thing that you hear is like, "Oh, I wish I could do that, man. I wish I could, like, move to Montana and live that lifestyle." I'm like, "Well, you can. Literally anyone can do." I mean, again, going back to one of the first things you said, like, you can have anything you want.
Anything.
The question is, do you really want it? Or do you want something else more? You may kinda want it,
Yeah.
and you may have convinced yourself you really want it, but you haven't compared that to what you really want. And, is it and some I get it, like, some people, you have a family. Your wants have to be a little bit different, I mean, unless you're a complete a-hole. Like,
Right. No, I care about my
and there are
marriage.
some of those people, like, um, and I'm not discounting that, but, like, someone with a family, for example, like, yeah, you have to balance your wants with their needs, but if you really wanted this life in Montana, you could figure it out with your family. Like, everyone's gonna have to make sacrifices, and, hopefully the family you build and the person you marry is going to be someone that you have compatible wants with, um, but, yeah, you know what? Kids may have to share a room for a while. You guys, yeah, things may be a little tight. I mean, I know dudes that have had to move their whole like, to chase the life they want, they've had to move their whole families into an RV for or a trailer for years, and it is a tough life, but the rewards for that are gonna be huge. It's it's anybody can have it. Anybody can have it. You're just not everyone's willing to make the sacrifices to have it.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, ultimately, you have to identify what you want. And one of the sad things is, and we're going to wrap this podcast up here in just a few minutes, but I don't think in life, society, parents, educators, whoever you come across, how many times have you been asked in your life, what do you want?
Oh, jeez.
It doesn't get asked. And
Nope.
so this I always talk about inward reflection leads to outward correction. So if you want an outward life that fulfills your soul, you have to go inward and you have to ask yourself, what do you want? And when you identify it, off to the races.
Absolutely. I consider myself really lucky, man. I had a family that still supports everything I do, all my fucking like wild hairs and adventures and lives I live. Um, and I just want to say that I'm super grateful to them for that. I know not everyone has that, so but yeah, man. Got to figure out what you want.
Absolutely. I love this. So, Sam, one thing I wanted to share with all the listeners is Sam is he's gone through his own brand switch from living country in the city to the wild initiative.
Mhm.
You're also in marketing. And what is your actual like
Dude, I do a
role?
little bit of everything. Like I'm virgin on selling feet pics right now, but I do so I have the podcast. More than anything, that's kind of just networking. I don't really make money off of it. It's more for making contacts and for hunts and for business. Uh, I do bladesmithing. I make knives. I forge them. I start to finish. I sell those. That makes it an okay amount of money. It's more for fun. But really, what pays the bills is I do digital marketing. I like focusing on companies in the outdoor industry. It's what I'm passionate about. I've worked at literally the biggest ad agencies in the world. I've managed digital for the biggest live events in the world, Coachella, Stagecoach, like these world class events, and I hated all of it. Hated LA. I hated the environment. I was not passionate about. I mean, I love music, dude. Like, don't get me wrong. Like we talked earlier, bro. I'll get down with some BTO and uh, all that good stuff. But I'm not like that's not my life. And so once I got out of there, man, and I started working with people in the industry, I'm like, this is what I love, man. And this is how I can be involved in the industry and doing what I love, but still actually getting paid for it. So yeah, I do, websites and as you know, logo designs.
Yep.
um,
So, all you listeners, all the stuff that you're starting to see now with the website, with the show, brand, logo, Soul Seekers, all that. That's with a little help from my friend Sam. Sam, I got a little piece of music trivia for you since
oh dear Lord, this is gonna be
you mentioned
bad.
Joe Walsh, and so my wife and my three children, we were on a awesome road trip this last summer. We went to Arizona. And the best road trip in music in the world is the Eagles. And so, of course, we had to swing into Winslow, and go stand on the corner in Winslow,
Absolutely.
Arizona. Do you know
I've
that
got a few pictures.
the Eagles have never actually been there?
I've heard that. I have heard like I remember I think after I went there the first time I looked up the story. And I
Jackson
can't remember
Brown's
yet.
car broke down and he had to get picked up, but they have never like gone to Winslow, Arizona to be like, the Eagles are here.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's funny.
I thought it was a big
Um,
disappointment. I was like, boo.
it is funny though, like, on that corner, like that song is just like playing on loop 24/7. It's like it's just I've been there a couple of times, typically after hunting Arizona, like I'll go up to wherever, Colorado, and I'll end up driving through Winslow and stop for some ice cream and a sandwich and do some work and then get a
my
picture next to the statue.
my wife and I have we didn't realize this at the time until just about a couple weeks ago, where we always end up where songs are about. So Winslow, Arizona, we just went to Lukenbach, Texas. We're gonna have to head down to LaGrange, Texas. You got China Grove. You got all these places where songs have been written about and performed. So, anyways,
Dude, really
yes,
quick, one last little bit of music trivia. One of the best, we were talking about concerts. One of the best ones, talking about the Eagles that I've ever been to, it was like this private charity event at the Nova when I was working in the music industry. And it was Joe Walsh, Vince Gill, James Taylor, Chris Stapleton, and Casey Musgraves all in a row, sitting on stools with acoustic guitars on stage, and that was it. Like they all just started playing together, dude. Casey Musgraves would be singing a song, and you see like James Taylor looking over, and he'd start like riffing off of it, and then Joe Walsh was, I mean, he's a little fried, let's face it,
Yeah.
but he was mostly just the comic relief the whole time. But dude,
I'm pretty
best
sure I've
ever.
seen that on YouTube where like Vince Gill lays it down because
Oh yeah.
it
I think he was being added, added to the Hall of Fame or something, and it was like a celebration of him. And so he was able to they wanted him to invite like people, his classic artists that he's played with, but then they wanted him to invite his two favorite, like new upcoming artists.
Yeah.
And so like, dude, like the five of them together was
it's fire.
It was once in a lifetime kind of a thing to see.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I
Anyway.
love it. Hey, how can people find you, follow along, all that?
Literally, if you just type, I mean, there are very few search bars you can type the Wild Initiative into and not find me. It just depends on how spicy you want to get. No, I kid.
Onlyfeet.com.
Jeez. No, like, I mean, pretty much anywhere you can. Don't judge me too harshly by my TikTok, but Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, pretty much any podcast platform you can find, just type in the Wild Initiative. I will show up probably the first 3 pages completely. So
I love it. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. Once again, if you liked it, please share it, subscribe, rate it. Also, go check out Soul Seeker. Season 2 is midway through. We got another episode coming out in the middle of September, one in October and one in November, and a lot of cool stuff coming your way. If you guys have any questions or feedback or follow-up, don't forget to reach out to us on the podcast. Guys, be blessed, freedom on, and remember that mentorship is conservation. You can never outgive good. I'm Johnny Mack. Stay soulful. If you enjoyed today's podcast and want to support the show, you can always like, share, subscribe, and leave a rating as it helps us share our mission of mentorship is conservation. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of Soul Seekers Nation as we transform lives through primal adventure. If you want to get more connected with the podcast, check out the Soul Seekers Nation Facebook group, as I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. So stay tuned and stay soulful.